discussing the roles, or the limited roles rather, for the Arab world at the level of the world stage. With us, we have Dr. Mustafa Uthman Ismail, former foreign minister of Sudan, and also Mr. Nasser Yassin from the American University in Beirut, Dr. Ahmed Zandani from the Ahmed bin Muhammad Military Academy, and Dr. Sham Al Ghannam from Carnegie Mellon University. I mentioned some of the reasons which are depriving the Arab world at the individual or collective levels to play a role in the world stage. We're starting with you, Dr. Mustafa. What's your assessment? In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, thank you very much, and thank you for the organizers of Al Jazeera's forum, which is, and for choosing these themes which are important for us all. And please allow me to delve into this theme from a rather simple idea, but yet important. This idea is based on the fact that what is happening in the Arab world vis-a-vis the Palestinian question is a symptom, and it's not just an isolated incident. And it's a symptom of the disease and the plague which the Arab countries are suffering from because of the inter-conflicts between them and the lack of respect for citizens' rights, democracy, despotism, etc. So the idea is, if we want to find a role for the Arab world within the region and outside it, and the collective action by Arab countries was doomed to failure because the system of the nation state and the system of the Arab countries working together collectively, and also another crisis which is at the regional level, and which is based on conflict rather than interests. These three systems caused this disease in the Arab world, and when the crisis in Gaza started, it was only natural that all of these crises will reflect on the situation in general. Now we are used to describing the Arab position as one of inward looking, in a state of backwardness. Maybe it is more to do with the changing of the function of our countries. If we look at the days of Jamal Abdel Nasser and others, the function of the Arab position or situation was to seek to find a role, to, even through confrontation and antagonism with others, to carve a role for the Arab countries. This has changed now into cohabitation, reaching normalization to full normalization, and ultimately to a state of inability and hopelessness. Before the year 2000, we did not hear of an Arab country which went outside the norms. Since the summit meeting of Al Khartoum in the 70s, and the three no's of no settlement, no concessions, and there was value attached to returning the lands that were taken forcefully from the Arab countries until we got to the Beirut summit, and no country went outside this unanimity, except, of course, for the position taken by the late Anwar Sadat of Egypt. Now, what we're seeing and what we're witnessing is a complete helplessness, inability. The, the Arab League couldn't even find enough commonality in the positions by its member states to issue a statement regarding the situation in Palestine. So, so the function changed from struggling to restore rights to coexisting with what's going on in the region. The first country which recognized Israel was Iran and Turkey. The situation has changed now. Now Iran and Turkey are no longer the same Iran and Turkey, which were at that time closer to Israel and in recognition of Israel. And the Arab states were at that time different. Now the Arab countries now which were in harmony with Iran and Turkey. Now the situation, Your Excellency, before I move to Dr. Nasser, you described the reality, the Arab reality, but you did not delve deeply into the causes as to the movement from trying to establish a role to normalization to total helplessness now. I want you please to tell me why have the Arab states moved from the stage where they wanted to restore rights to total helplessness. I can summarize the reasons to five main reasons or five main paths. First, the crisis of governance and legitimacy within the Arab states, which opened the door for political strife and internal conflict, which made the countries concerned with their own internal affairs rather than focusing on joint Arab causes and the Palestinian cause. Secondly, the wrong behavior by some Arab countries, like the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, was a devastating blow to Arab solidarity, and this made some Arab countries seek security outside the Arab world and no longer have any trust or confidence in their neighboring countries. Another point was the fragility in the economies, which lacked integration and encouraged people to restore to conditional financing, debt services, and this has impacted the role they can play vis-à-vis the Palestinian cause. I wish that Arab countries may work together to help each other. Now look at Egypt with its enormous debt problems, and this made countries look inward and be concerned with their internal situation. The fourth element is the unlimited, unconditional support by the West for Israel and the inability of Arab countries to leverage any influence they have. Number five, the regional atmosphere and environment which attracted outside intervention, and this kind of intervention turned our region into an arena for inner fighting. I remember in the Tehran conference last year, which was attended by a number of Arab and Asian countries and discussed the situation of the region in view of the latest developments. I presented my idea that we have a triangle of Iran, Turkey, and Arab countries, and this region will not see any peace unless the relations between these three countries or three entities are solved. Thank you, Your Excellency. I turn to Dr. Nasser, formerly Minister of the Environment in Lebanon. Maybe the Lebanese situation is somewhat different, but ironically, the fragility of the Lebanese state has allowed some outside partners to support the Palestinian cause, whereas the position of the government itself is similar to other countries. To what extent has this situation allowed the Palestinian resistance, even at some stage, to play a role inside Lebanon?
Good morning. Thank you, Hassan, for the introduction. Thank you, Al Jazeera, for organizing this forum. I am in the Arabic Center for Studies now. So the question here is about the influences over Lebanon because of the regional crises. But I want to speak about geography to answer the question, even if indirectly, but to clarify through analysis in geography, which has been neglected politically, to answer this question and maybe to show Lebanon as a paradigm of the small Arab countries who struggle because of the Arab retreat mentioned by Minister Mustafa. A book issued lately from the Arab Center, I don't want to make a commercial for it, but it's a translated book for David Endelman. It's entitled Red Line in the Sand, which is a book from a journalist who worked in international news agencies, and it was translated of late, and there is a version in Arabic of it. This shows the disintegration of the red lines which were in the world in all geographies, and the establishment of the state countries. And this is about a geography that is between regions, and now we are at a moment we see the red lines being redrawn, and we see them clearly during the past 2 years. If they are broken, they will affect specifically the countries that are fragile, such as Lebanon and the Levant countries. So we see now reformulation of those red lines, and this has consequences on the vulnerable countries. So this new geography must be looked through three pillars, geographical that is, and I will try to be brief. First, regarding Lebanon and some countries in the Levant and other Arab countries, with the reappearance of sectarian and national identities, Lebanon struggles and suffers because of restoring its geography, because it was built in a fragile way. But there was what is called the Lebanese formula. Some know it, which is Muslims, Christians, and other sectors agreed to organize the relationship between them after the end of the French colonization and to have accordance between each other. The problem with this formula is that it is shakeable easily. We have seen it in 1958 with the Baghdad alliance and with the Arab nationalism and the Arab or the Palestinian issue and its movement to Lebanon. Also, the launch of the resistance after the Cairo Agreement. So we see all the regional geography affect this. And since a while, the last 2 decades, we see there is an intervention from regional countries to support non-state actors that affected this situation, which brought us into crises that we still suffer from. This sectarian geography currently, we see it now in this formula, and it is shaken deeply, specifically because it was affected by regional conflicts and intervention regionally by the support of non-state actors, and this affected the Ta'if agreement and the reformulation of this reality. So we see Lebanon being affected by regional interventions, but there is another point dealing with what has led to the Taif agreement, which was brought about a stability, and there was like an insurance policy by Arab countries to restore this stability and balance. So now we see a type of stress, and this Arab guarantor is withdrawing from the positive intervention. This will have consequences on the economy and the politics and the social life. However, we see that what's happening right now, specifically in the past 2 years, in terms of redrawing the geography of the region, the Levant specifically, through wars, displacement, genocide wars, and these are moments that will affect to a large extent this stability and balance in Lebanon, and it will have consequences. So reformulating those lines, especially in the Levant, will have a double impact on the fragility of Lebanon. But I see the current system does not have the wisdom or realism to face it. That means we will enter into a whirlpool pool of crises. Third, and maybe this point was mentioned by Dr. Mustafa through speaking of the economic factor, which comes before these two components regarding the economic geography, the geographic economy, because economy has its influence and sometimes we ignore it and tend to go with what is geopolitical. Specifically, Lebanon lost its economic role with this geographic economy. Lebanon, since the mid 1950s and the appearance of oil, benefited from this, and we had money flooding into Lebanon, and this has ended. So this economic and financial role has ended and moved to other countries because of the transformations in the region, financially and economically. But there are attempts that are still ongoing with the political and financial and economic systems in Lebanon that Lebanon is trying to revive. So it has eaten up itself by itself, and the economy in Lebanon has become unlinked to the region's economies, except to a small extent of exporting. But now they are exporting human rights to the geographical economic region. Why the economy? Because nobody appreciated the stability in the Arab world and the Levant. If we look at the reviving of the economic system anew, I want to say something, please. Lebanon is an example, as it is Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine. Those countries are of small economies. Maybe Syria is bigger, but we are in an important triangle between the we have the triangle of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries in Qatar, UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, the GCC countries, chiefly headed by Saudi Arabia. They have more than 2 trillion size of the economy. Turkey, which is also an hour distance, also 2 trillion. Also, Egypt also has 700 billion. So we are speaking about $3 trillion as the size of this economy in a nearby region that needs a serious economic integration to support those countries economically, not to go through different paths. So the triangle I see here is a triangle based on Saudi Arabia and the GCC countries, Turkey and Egypt. This can protect politically and geopolitically the small countries in the Levant who are suffering crisis. These crises spoken by Dr. Mustafa and Dr. Nasser, I speak to you about them, Dr. Ahmed. These crises that have led to the retreat of the Arab role, are they structural in terms of the formulation of those Arab countries, or they are as a result of foreign intervention that has led to what it has led in those countries?
In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for hosting me. This is a very important forum indeed, and the themes we discuss are important to all of us. Your question is at the heart of the problem we are facing in the Arab world, and in an attempt to answer it, we have to touch the raw nerve and understand what is the secret behind this weakness and this state of backwardness. And it's not a secret that everybody understands the situation, so much so that people are wondering, is there really an Arab order as such? When you look at the world order or the international order, you see there are central states and peripheral states. We know that we are on the margins. This means that we cannot impact what goes on in the world, and our policies are reactive and not proactive. If we do not say that we are in a subservient state of affairs, and when we talk about Israel, Israel is at the core of this international order, and Israel enjoys an open-ended support before any crisis, during crises, and after the crisis. And this support is absolute. I remember the reaction of the United States when the Palestinian resistance launched the Al-Aqsa flood battle. They immediately sent aircraft carriers with a clear warning to anybody who will attempt to support the Palestinians or stand by them. So what's the secret in making this international order? Who created the system? And the situation is not as if things just happen due to failures by some factors. The question really is this system which was built since the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, and the Arab regions under the Ottoman Empire were colonialized and designed for this region. Of course, Britain played a pivotal role in this. They sent their experts, their anthropologists, geographical experts who came to the region. Then when they talk, John Philippi, and Philippi, he studied even the desert and the birds and the life of the birds, and many others who study this region. They study the geography, the anthropology, the different sects, and this order was established. Now in Iraq, the fragile order which is built on Gertrude Bill was an Orientalist and an intelligence officer, and through her reports determined who would be appointed and who would be hired or fired, and established this order built on factionalism and sectarianism. Mark Sachs, the famous British Foreign Secretary who signed the Sykes-Picot agreements with his French counterpart, viewed this region as a map which is to be redrawn in a way to establish a fragile regional order which is more susceptible to division and not unity and can be easily controlled. These are the ones who built this order. We in the Arab and Muslim worlds at that time were no more than, well, there were attempts, we were not completely useless, but there were attempts to resist. The United Nations conducted important studies in 2002 and 2004 about the situation of the Arab world, and discovered that in the Cold War period, the Arab countries were better in the fields of education, healthcare, etc. There were attempts, but like when Dr. Mustafa said, the wrong decisions, and like the occupation of Kuwait, and also there was a change in the international world order, but we started facing a unilateral, a unipolar system in the world, and view of the insecurity and fragility in our region, and this has culminated in the genocide in the last 2 years, when the whole world witnessed it but didn't do anything. This came at a time when the Arab world was exhausted after the Arab revolutions. When the fire reaches you in your bedroom, you don't care about what happens in your garden. This is the problem. Now the Sudan, for example, Yemen, the situation there for the last 15, 20 years, and the situation in Lebanon, and even in North Africa, Arab countries, there are problems, but one problem, like the Western Sahara problem, paralyzed the entire region. And many of the problems could have been solved and created a strong bloc. They are close geographically, religiously, ethnically, but because of this problem, they could not find solutions because of the structure of these regimes. And normally, they because of the lack of legitimacy, of course. Dr. Ahmed, it seems that the problem basically is a structural one. Since the independence from colonialism, the Arab countries had inside them the roots of problems which were exacerbated later by crises. And faced with that, we saw competition by Arab countries, competition over the roles they play, competition over economic resources. Dr. Ghannam, to what extent is this competition can play a positive role to uh, take under control the reins of the situation, and especially when it comes to the Palestinian cause? Thank you very much. I will try to respond to your question and what His Excellency the Minister has said. I think the competition, the positive one, is good and required, and we should all be keen on it. The problem is there is the wrong side of competition. And this has weakened all Arab countries in general and the Gulf countries in particular. There are opportunities, but to utilize them requires an immediate change. First of all, we must intensify real cooperation and not just symbolic ones, and we should have joint infrastructure, and there should be economic cooperation before any military or political cooperation in the networks of communications. We see in the Yemen the latest intervention by Saudi Arabia in Yemen focuses on this, and this is very important and vital and should not be ignored. All these countries are faced with separatist movements. The other point which I deem important, that the friction points, the hotspots, should be dealt with immediately, and these fires should be extinguished. Somalia, Sudan, the Fertile Crescent in its entirety, Yemen, all of these areas. And what what can be ended with a one phone call is much better than being dealt with a battalion of military force. And of course, we shouldn't have amongst us those who are conspiring with outside powers against us all. Of course, it's normal that nation states compete. These are not charities, but there is the stability of the Arab countries as a whole, which should be respected and taken into consideration. The other thing is the importance of diversifying international cooperations. I'm not talking about cliches, even the partnerships which do not show interest immediately, but that should be there. It's true that the American allies are the most important in the region, and this is apparent to all of us, but even the Gulf countries differ in the way they deal with America. But we also have ties with China, Russia, Africa, and Asia. This gives us a margin of maneuver, and I think there is a concept, and we learn this through the Russian-Ukrainian model. I'm not talking about neutrality similarly to Switzerland, but the principle of the non-alignment is still good, and it's worthy of consideration and can be achievable. But sometimes things cannot be achieved without having power and force in all its forms. The most important thing which we saw is the naked force without any ethics, any morality being apparent. has Morgenthau in his book Politics Between Nations talked about the importance of force, but he sort of covered that with ethics. Now, this is just brute force. America, when they invaded Iraq, used nation building, but now nobody uses that. The major powers do not deem it necessary to use that. Unfortunately, we are the bottom of the balance of power. The best that we can do is absorb shocks and manage them. And we can also raise the cost for those who cause these crises in a way which can impact the cause people who cause this kind of crisis. And sometimes this takes us to some unexpected forms of alliances. The Abraham Accords are not an ethical normalization and can never be so, but it's a temporary equation to strike some balance. What we want is sustainable alliances. Now we see a change in the world. There is the hybrid world, the new technology, and Mr. Hassan, you mentioned this. There are some developmental models which is reflected not only in defense but on security, the economy, and so much so that we can now expedite our move towards them. Now the fluidity is huge and the discrepancies are big. Even the major powers which used to conspire against us now have differences between them. Look at Greenland, at Europe and America, the East and West. These are areas we can move into, and this requires seriousness, authenticity, true intentions, and the ability to deal with the status quo. And this is achievable at this difficult times. After all this explanation, thank you, gentlemen. We have a little bit of time. I think we'll ask some questions from the floor to see if you have anyone amongst you who wants to ask a question. Please make your questions brief and pointed to save time. Assalamu alaikum. My greetings to all the panelists. I have one request. Ask people to to stand up for a moment of silence in remembrance of Al Jazeera's martyrs and the martyrs for freedom everywhere.
صباح الخير. هدى نابلسي.
Khudar Nabilsi, a Lebanese lawyer. My question is to Dr. Nasser. Your Excellency, thank you. Allow me to say that you have responded indirectly to the question of Mr. Hassan. Contrary to what you said, you will answer directly. So, do you believe that the quick transformations that are taking place right now, how can we keep the Palestinian cause as a central issue in the international and regional perspective? I want a direct answer. Let's take two more questions and then we will answer. Abdullah Shaiji, Kuwait University. Thank you all, and I thank the panelists We are living in an Arab retreat. The Arab regime failed drastically. Each Arab country now is trying to feel its head and neck and be careful. We see the escalation against Iran coming with Trump now. There is no multipolarism. It's actually my way or the highway. So the question here, Mr. Hisham spoke about the diversification of partnerships. How? Also, he spoke about the GDP, $3 trillion or more for the region. But the question is, how can those challenges and difficulties be dealt with by the fragile states? How can we get up? Who leads the Arab system now? The GCC countries, true, but even within that, we witness fractures now. The invasion of the occupation of Kuwait has brought about the Americans. Kuwait now is the most country that has uh, American bases now, even though it was rejecting that in the past. Now we see CENTCOM, Central Command now, and they are attacking Iran. So these are not assets but liability. So now who is leading the Arab League is defunct. So we want results. Theorization is good, but we need actions, not words. Thank you. Peace be upon you all. Dr. Samir Abu Ayyash from the Committee of Palestinian Scholars. The question is, the situation we have seen in the genocide war, the Arab countries, were they really so weak that they couldn't take up a bigger role than the one that they have taken? As moderate and as mediocre as it was there a bigger role that could prevent, even to a little extent, the genocide that has taken place in Gaza after the Al-Aqsa flood? Thank you. We start with the answers, and briefly, please. I will break with you some old stories. There is no one Arab system. So this system is on the retreat and does not exist. Let us come out of this dilemma so that we can resolve it. We're still building on emotions that go back to the 60s. So the weakest institution here is the Arab League, with all due respect to my colleagues, if any of them is from it. But the Palestinian cause, because of history and culture and geography, is still central in the Arab world. And I want to have a suggestion here and a recommendation to look at the results of the Arab Index by the Arab Center to show how the Palestinian cause is still central, at least with the peoples. But there is a difference and variations between those countries who are near to Palestine and those who are far. And maybe Dr. Mustafa al-Barghouti would help me in this. The countries that are near to Palestine are so stressful, and Lebanon and Syria specifically. And we should ask ourselves why we have reached this stage, why the index says this. Those countries that are near to Palestine are less understanding and less compassionate to the Palestinian cause than those that are far. Also, we all, as Arabs and Lebanese, support the Palestinian national program and to support the Palestinians to resolve their problems and to stand by their side due to culture, religion, history, and geography, but they also should take up the responsibility and we should help them to resolve their issues by themselves. So we should see today, before tomorrow, a Palestinian project built on the Palestinians themselves and to come out from the excessive love that has led to the retreat of the Palestinian cause. Dr. Mustafa, before we answer the intervention of Abdullah Shaji, there was a question. Were the Arab countries able to do more than what they did to stop the genocide in Gaza? Thank you. Yes, I think the Arab countries could have done more, and the Arab peoples also could have done more as well. But there is a discrepancy now between the relationship between the regimes and the populations. So the regimes do not have the will to do the work to face this genocide, and the use of the excessive force by those regimes against their own peoples made the people unable to defend a cause that was sponsored and supported by other foreign countries who are not Arabs and not Muslims, but from a humanitarian perspective, they stood in solidarity with the Palestinians in the universities and in other places, even though the Arab populations and the Arab peoples were unable to do that. So the war of Gaza will bring about more extremist groups because they have not seen in their leaders any response, whether these are intellectual, professors, media, imams of mosques, civil society organizations. So the ruling system is not just in using the law, and thus their legitimacy has been undermined. So there is no will because they fear for their position and they fear from the superpowers more than they fear their own peoples. And the peoples are facing crackdown by the regimes. The question to conclude with, I don't know to what extent Dr. Ahmed regarding the putting of theories. We can explain maybe now the problem, but we cannot find a solution. For how long we will keep speaking about the symptoms without putting solutions and alternatives for the reality that is now existing? Briefly, the question by Dr. Abdullah Shaiji, I remember once I asked a scholar when I was doing my PhD, I asked him a similar question and he said, if I had the answer, I would be the Secretary General of the United Nations now. So it's a dilemma, it's a predicament. So how to change those theories into real policies? So there is a retreat, there is a weakness now. So the big countries in the Arab world and in the region should take up their responsibility and to start working strategically to put blocks for strategic projects. There isn't a magic wand. There is no magic solution. And the dilemma of Sykes-Picot existed, which is a dilemma, and the countries that are able, especially Saudi Arabia, should put forward strategic plans. Otherwise, they will follow suit with everybody else. Hisham, Dr. Hisham, policies are built on theories and ideas, then later on they become policies on the ground. In the Arab world, this issue is different. What we said is not out of theorization, but briefly said, I believe there is a diversification of partnerships. Partnerships differ. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is different. I give two examples here. When there was a pressure by the United States on the GCC and Saudi Arabia that they should use the financial system to punish Russia, this did not happen till today. Saudi Arabia rejected to use its financial system to besiege Russia because it's unbeneficial, and it has been proven. And in terms of diversification of partnerships in the East or the Orient, specifically China, I have this commercial, even though it's not a commercial. I have a detailed research about the extent of the cooperation of Saudi Arabia with China. It is going up in infrastructure, highway, ports, military manufacturing, and this is still ongoing till today. That's what I mean by partnerships. So this is ongoing. It did not change, even though the American voice is higher up on this issue. Maybe we take a question now. The last question. Let's look for the last question. Awatif Abdul Latif, media outlet staff. Can I say that the officials in the Arab world, if not all of them, then most of them, are they absent? We as peoples, we see the meetings, especially on the platform, Dr. Mustafa Uthman, the foreign minister for some certain years, were they not present? There are conspiracies taking place, but most people do not understand what's taking place against them. The whole Arab states with all their regimes, are they unable of what's happening around them? Dr. Mustafa, I agree with Dr. Awatif that the Sudanese crisis, academically when we speak about it, we classify it as the biggest complex and complicated crisis. It is complex in terms of the overlapping of what is inside with what is outside, what is national with what is foreign, and what is regional with what is international. All these have made it a complex crisis. But as when we speak about the Palestinian cause, we say Arab crises have led to having a sick person theory or mentality. There is no effort to form a committee to take care of the Sudanese issue. Why? Because some of those Arab countries taking part in this crisis in Sudan. So the Arab League itself, when we talk about how can we develop the Arab situation, we should also speak about the institutions of the Arab work which are defunct now. So the Sudanese crisis now, undoubtedly, it should be looked at as not a crisis of the Sudanese country, even though it threatens the Sudanese existence. And this is the biggest crisis in modern history in Sudan in terms of its consequences from a humanitarian point of view and politically speaking, and in terms of its complications internally and externally. The Sudanese crisis is not the first in the Arab world, but it is a paradigm. So all that translates the reality in which we live today, which is reflected as undermining of the Arab role in the central issue, which is the Palestinian cause. I wish we could have taken more questions and more deliberations, but our time is up. Thank you all for taking part. Dr. Hisham Al-Ghannam, Dr. Ahmed Al-Zandani, Dr. Nasser Al-Yassin, and Mustafa, Uthman, Ismail. Thank you all, and we thank the audience. Now we take a break, and then we resume our sessions later on. Thank you. Just to clarify, the martyrs of Al Jazeera, may Allah bless them, and we appreciate this request given by our